Hi there, everyone. Welcome to our session on implementing ASM in higher ed. Let's get this ball rolling, and I'll introduce Taylor Bell.
Thanks, guys. I am Taylor Bell. I am from Maryville University, and actually I just got a message today that I'm now the senior instructional technologist, so it's a good Tuesday. And I love the 90s. I always when I do a presentation to give the audience something fun about me. I adore the 90s, so from Super Nintendo to Ninja Turtles, the whole nine. Adore it. So what are we going to talk about today? I am here to talk to you about Maryville University and the birth of digital world, which is what we refer to our one-to-one as. We're going to talk about how our strategic goals have led to strategic learning in the classroom. We're going to get to that Apple School Manager portion, which is what we all came for, right? And how that is integrated into our active learning ecosystem. And finally, what's the takeaway for you? What can you do with this? How many people here are in education? How many people are in higher education? And how many of you guys have a one-to-one? Awesome. You're funny. She came with me, so I know all her answers to the questions. All right, so let's get this ball rolling. Maryville has this vision to be the innovative leader in higher education. So we work hard to promote revolutionary learning, and we like to base that on student-centeredness and student outcomes. So what's Digital World? It is our iPad initiative. So we have a one-to-one. It's got about 4,200 iPads. We have been able to implement over 1,000 ASM classes. We have over 40 apps. This data is probably a little off. We have about 59 apps that we provide free of charge, over 130 curated apps for deployment campus-wide. We have over 100 Apple teachers and 5 Apple distinguished educators. So the mission of Digital World was just to create a campus-wide initiative that provides what started as just traditional undergraduate students with an iPad to help engage them in the classroom. We wanted it to be more diverse, more customizable, more interactive in the learning environment, right? Because we are working on an active learning ecosystem. We wanted to promote digital literacy, and what better way to do that through coursework, integrating the iPad into all the work that the students have to do, whether that's group work or individual homework. Identifying high-quality learning content and delivering it in a digital format. The iPad made that really easy to do. And then equipping students and faculty with technology that would level the playing field. So we've had situations where we've got students taking quizzes on MacBooks. We've got students in the same course taking the same quiz on an iPhone. And while they're getting the same information, the medium for that information is altered, so that student's going to have a different experience on an iPhone than they do on their MacBook, without question. And so just to give you an idea of some of those apps that we're providing, we've got paid apps that we give to everyone on campus. That includes Notability, which is one of the premier note-taking apps. We love that at Maryville, and all of our students get an Apple Pencil with their iPad. So this is a really empowering tool that they can take to the classroom and really engage while they're taking notes. Explain Everything. That's a whiteboarding app that a lot of our students like to use for presentations. There's an instructor at Maryville who takes things kind of to the next level, and she'll use features from different apps. So she'll use Magic Move from Keynote, and then she'll integrate equations from Explain Everything. She's a physics instructor, so she gets pretty deep. And then she'll pull all that together and then record it in clips and add cool features to that. And she gets really deep into the content that she's curating for her courses. Inspiration Maps is another one. That's a mind mapping tool that we provide to our students, and it just, you never know what you're going to get. So I asked them to use Inspiration Maps to create a character log, and we do StrengthsFinder. How many of you have done Gallup StrengthsFinder in your organizations? Right, so we have our incoming students do it. It's part of our active learning ecosystem, so that we learn more about our students and they learn more about themselves. And I said, create a character log of yourself. And they came back with some of the most interesting, interesting things using the Inspiration Maps tool. So it's just been really awesome. As for our Apple teachers, it kind of started as talk. A couple of people in the instructional tech office, we got our Apple teacher certifications and word spread around, and now we have 2-week-long professional developments that we do for all of our full-time faculty, and we've dedicated 2 of those days each of those weeks to Apple teacher development and workshop. So this is our students actually being deployed iPads. This is from our past deployment, which we're going to talk about now. So how does all this happen? What's the process? So we have something called START. It is the Student Testing, Advising, Registration, and Transition Program at Maryville. That's a mouthful, so we just call it START. And it's where students start to get acquainted with Maryville. I'm like not good at this mic, huh? And so during this process, students are introduced to all the unique programs that we have at Maryville, and they also get their iPad, right? So that's super exciting. Oh, now it's my earring. Guys, you're patient. So since 2014, we've been able to, I'm going to 86 the earring. I think that's going to make it better. We've been able to kind of curate these deployments with the help of JAMF. So yay, JAMF! Letting us set up our pre-stage enrollment, skipping all of those pesky pages and setup options that we don't necessarily, like I don't need to know what every student's preference is for Siri. Turn her on later. It's okay. And so we do that. We have had it from April 7th to September 30th of this year. We deployed 1,410 iPads to incoming freshmen at those START events, which is what you see here, and then in individual deployments. So some students are not able to attend START. They then contact us and get their iPad on their own. So the next piece of this is the professional development. So we don't just give all of the students iPads and then send them to class. We actually take time to meet with all of our full-time faculty. So over 95% of our full-time faculty have gone through a semester-long training, a professional development that helps them learn how they can use the iPad better in the classroom. This is actually my first year leading the professional development on my own. It has been very exciting. We go through things like how to AirPlay, how do you do a screen recording? And then we get into the apps. So some of those curated apps that we use, like Socrative Student and Socrative Teacher, will practice making quizzes, and then they get homework. So I send them home and say, make a quiz, use it in your class, document how it went. We also go over things like Bayboard, which is another one of those whiteboarding apps, like Explain Everything. And then using iMovie and clips to create content that's engaging for students, and then encouraging students to use those tools to make content of their own. Because like, how many PowerPoints can you grade in a night before you're like, all right, I get the idea. We also go over Apple Classroom, of course, teaching them how to use that. And before, we're actually going to get into how we load Apple Classroom. But now this is our first time teaching it where you can create your own classes. So it has been quite a ball, and their new learning curve, they're getting kind of scared of the autonomy. So it's been very interesting. All right, and then the final piece of this is student outcomes. So what happens? We give them iPads, we do the professional development, and then what? So we have surveys that go out to students twice a year. One of them is on technology, and one of them is on student life. So 81% of our students said that the iPad contributed to their learning experience in a positive way. And so I went out to my students and I tried to operationalize the idea of a positive way. So a direct quote. One of my students was like, it's not like we have them just 'cause. Like, you know, like it's not just 'cause, it's 'cause I go to class and all of my teachers are like using them, like in hard ways. And I was like, in hard ways, what do you mean? She was like, well, like, so I thought you were being hard with the Inspiration Maps character mind map with my strengths and my virtues, but then I had an instructor tell me that I had to make a quiz and that my quiz was going to be the study guide for the whole class. And that was a hard way to use my iPad. So just getting that, contributing to that learning experience in a positive way, giving the students autonomy, teaching them to use skills that maybe they haven't used before, teaching them different techniques. And then also 94% of our students agree that the technology that we give them is instrumental to their success. So we were really nervous that we were just giving them Netflix machines and that we were going to regret it. And so we amped up the professional development, we got everybody ready, we have active learning ecosystems, and no, turns out that's not what happened. A lot of students are saying that without their iPad, they're not sure how they would complete some of the projects. Without their iPad, there's no way they'd take as good of notes because they didn't have the ability to drop in a diagram of the ear into their notes. They didn't have the ability to look up the movement of the respiratory system or the circulatory system and integrate that into Notability so that they could annotate on it. They didn't have the ability to have a digital form of their notes. I can remember so often seeing students before the iPad initiative began that would wait in line in front of the printer, and then they'd print off pages and pages and pages of notes only to leave them on the printer because they were running too late. And so we've now, thankfully, become more sustainable, but also we've saved these students time and energy, and they are really benefiting from it. So and the last big part of this is our strategic plan. So our strategic plan has 4 themes: the active learning ecosystem, the idea of transformational innovation, diversity and inclusiveness, and strategic growth. Each one of these items plays a huge part in our ability to be successful at Maryville with the use of our one-to-one and the implementation of Apple School Manager in the classroom. That first theme, the active learning ecosystem, it just refers to Maryville's promotion of creating a campus-wide ecosystem where students are at the dead center. Student-centeredness is something you hear thrown around on campus all the time. We actually mean it. So in the ecosystem, students, faculty, and staff are all engaged all year round, and it's a continuous, sustainable process that makes sure that no matter where students are, there's learning going on. If they are in Starbucks, that is a conducive space for them to do both academic and real-world learning. If they are walking through the quad, there's a lot of opportunities for learning. We have a completely active ecosystem. Transformational innovation refers to how we develop and deliver higher education. We've re-engineered the idea of pedagogy. We've re-engineered the idea of process, and we have integrated lots of new systems that help support our active learning ecosystem and make sure that we're keeping students at the center. Diversity and inclusiveness is just like what it sounds like, and this is one of my favorites to tie back to the iPad initiative, back to digital world, because people often say, well, what does diversity have to do with iPads? Well, diversity is so much more than just culture. Diversity is age. Diversity is demographics beyond economics. So when you say that we're giving students all the same tool, whether that student is 10, 20, or 80, we've got all the same playing field. Every tap is just the same as every tap. If you don't tap, there's accessibility features that help you get there. So Apple and JAMF have really helped us come together on diversity and inclusiveness in our active learning ecosystem. That final piece is strategic growth. So Maryville leverages everything that we have to make sure that we are meeting the community and the values of the market out there. So a lot of higher education institutions aren't catering to anyone outside of that traditional undergraduate student. We work very hard to make sure that we're reaching students not only across the US, but across the world and across different demographics and from different backgrounds. So all of these objectives, water break, and goals that we've set up have allowed us to really look and go forward and be transformational and innovate in our active learning ecosystem. And that is what leads us to the implementation of Apple School Manager. So, every success story starts somewhere. So we were at JNUC 2016, my first JNUC, back at the Guthrie Theater. It was beautiful, but the Wi-Fi was terrible. How many of you were there? Exactly, so you know precisely what I'm talking about. It's like you're eating lunch, you're looking over the Mississippi, you're wondering why no one's emailed you all day. You know it's a lie, but you carry on. On the first day, Michael Devins spoke about Apple School Manager. And we sat in there captivated, like, oh, this sounds really cool. We could use it for monitoring. We could use it for proctoring. Oh my goodness, and so we just started spiraling out of control. All the ideas were just flowing. And the next day, we were like, oh, there's 2 more sessions. We can learn so much more. And we go into Apple School Manager 1. It was actually down the street at a coffee shop, so there was a lot of fun things going on that day. And we learned so much. I remember taking so many notes and like making a note to myself that was in all caps, like, learn what API means. That will help you. And so we went to Apple School Manager 2, and we had all these ideas. So we're sitting in the lobby of the Guthrie later on, right before the end of JNUC, and we're talking to each other because you don't have any other options, because again, not very good Wi-Fi. And my director is like, so when we get home, here's the deal. I want you guys to learn more about Apple School Manager. I want you to implement it. I want you to pilot it through the spring, and I want it to be ready to run in the summer. Oh, okay. Meanwhile, our Apple rep walks by and is like, guys, it's a K-12 tool, and it's in like pre-beta. He was like, yeah, I get that, but I really see a space for it in higher ed, and we love pre-beta. Well, we're gonna pre-beta that to death. We're just gonna keep on, we're gonna test it, it's gonna be great, we're gonna run it. So we've conceptualized, we find out that we can, Apple School Manager provides these CSVs. We can fill in the CSVs, then we'll just upload them, and then we'll sync the classes with what was Casper at the time, but with Jamf Pro. Great, right? Yes, this is totally doable. So in this process, we said, well, what could go wrong? We were concerned about student reactions. I think something came up that actually someone said, that Big Brother vibe, you know, like where we know what they're doing. How often do we know what they're doing? Like if they're watching Netflix in their dorm, do I know what they're watching? So kind of learning the boundaries of how Apple School Manager and Apple Classroom worked. Student participation, if they're weirded out that we are spying on them, are they gonna stop bringing their devices to class? How are we enforcing this? We are giving them device, we are encouraging them to use it, and usage has been very high, but if we start doing things that they don't like, how are they gonna respond? And then there's a lot of courses. So even just catering to the on-ground version of all of our classes, between 16-week courses and then 8-week hybrid courses, the idea that we would have to compile these CSVs, which, mind you, we still don't know how we're doing that, then get them into the Apple School Manager, do an SFTP upload, sync them with Jamf, and run it every 8 and 16 weeks. So we said, well, what results do we expect? Like, will that be worth it? We probably get increased engagement, right? More in-class responses, more cohesive group work, synchronized learning opportunities. This is really the one that our director had in his head when he saw Apple School Manager. He said, I really hate telling students to navigate to a website and not being able to find them when I want to airdrop the website to them, or them using Google Chrome when I'm asking them to use Safari, or them just Googling something and not going to a web browser at all. Or when you all have the same app and you want to navigate to the same app, how do you ensure that all those students are in that app? Decreased derailing activities, we all know these all too well. It's like you're really getting after it. You're talking about the respiratory system, and you're like, alveoli sacs on the lungs, and you're really into it. That's all I know about the respiratory system, guys. And you just see somebody on their iPad, and they're like using their iPad. They're not writing, they're kind of like tapping, but they're not typing. And you're like, what are you doing? And you go over there, and the student's playing Hole IO. Have you guys discovered Hole IO yet? Like, you are a hole, and you just use your finger and you drag it around, and you suck things up, and the more things you suck up, the bigger the hole gets. And without Apple School Manager, I actually wouldn't even know that that's a thing, because I watched one of my students one day in classroom, in my class, while I was instructing, suck up a whale into her Hole IO. And like, so now I play the game because it's addictive. But not what we're looking for in the classroom. And then optimize time management. So instead of having students playing games, the idea that if you want to share a PDF, you want to share a web page, you want to all open the same app, we now have that at the tip of our fingers, at the touch of a button. And then minimizing off-task activities due to screen monitoring. So Classroom has a function where you can actually see the screen of each of the students as long as their display is on, which has been very helpful. And have been a learning opportunity because, Hole IO. So where do we start this? This is where we started it. So we go home, and we are diligent in figuring out how we can use these CSVs to our advantage and how we're going to upload them. And so we took a look. We'll get a little closer here. And Apple School Manager provides us with 6 CSVs. We get 6 templates, a student one, a staff one, course, class, location, and roster. It all makes sense. So we break it down. This is what everybody's asking for. And I'll just give you a second to look at that. It was probably like 5 of us sat around the table that is in this office. Like I didn't even want to recreate this digitally for you because this stayed on this board for months. An entire semester. We got back from JNUC at the end of October and got immediately to it. I want to say this stayed on the board well into the next April, even after we had successfully implemented Apple School Manager, because we did a lot of work to get here. And so once we got here, we sent all of this over to the Director of Enterprise Learning at Maryville and said, hey, help us. Where can we get this information? Where can we get all of this? Well, that person is also the Canvas administrator, and I work very closely with him, and he was like, well, we can probably get something together where we can pull all this information down and have it palatable so we can put it in these CSVs. So we worked for probably about a week, pretty diligently, to create a feed from Canvas that responded appropriately to each of these items and filled in the CSVs for us. And then we would zip them up and run them. So I made a little sped up video. So this is a very clean version of what we do. So now we've gotten to a place where we can use a manifest and we can go in and make a request, and that's how we pull them. Before that, he would just give us these 6 zip files, maybe all zipped up, and we'd go and we'd take them to the SFTP server and we'd log in with the Apple School Manager password, which is like a gazillion characters. And we'd get logged in and we'd wait on the edge of our seats. We're very excited. We're really proud of ourselves. We've worked so hard. And then we get back errors. We wouldn't get like 5 errors or even 100 errors. We get like 5,000 errors every time. Well, this doesn't match this, and this doesn't match this, and how many instructors are teaching this class? Because I don't think you can have more than 3. Okay, this is fun, and a little bit of that. Yeah, so we waited and finally got it together to where we could see where the errors were, and now, I made that sound easy, but it was like, we would pull all the errors out, and we would put them in a spreadsheet, and then we would see which things matched up with which items on which line, and then we would create some sort of output that explained all the problems, and then we'd send that to the Director of Enterprise Learning, and go from there, and try again. So Thankfully, that's not the process anymore. So we conceptualized, we uploaded, we synced, but now instructors can create their own classes. Yay! And so this is the part that I'm talking about where they were scared of autonomy. Our first class that's going through to learn how to use Classroom to create their own classes. Because, when it's all nice, you show up on the first day of class, get your iPad out, and all your classes are listed, and all your students are listed. That's awesome, but there are some limitations. Limitations like getting the rights to get every photo of every student. So instead of having a photo, you've just got that avatar icon, which is no one, and you've got just their username. Well, if you've got 50 students in your class, you may not know who E. Schmitz 2 is. Maybe not yet, but you know that 6 of them are named Emily, so it's got to be 1, right? And so Apple School Manager was kind of limited in that way. You couldn't make any manipulations to the courses if you were the instructor without contacting me and saying, hey, would you mind logging in and changing this or adding this? We have some courses that are fairly large and that are taught by 5 instructors or that are taught by multiple instructors on different nights. So being able to add that many people, there were all of these limitations before Classroom 2.0 and iOS 12. And so now, we are able to do that, and we are going to do that now. I'm really excited. We're going to do it now. So it's activity time. If you have your devices, your iPad, you can join the classroom with these steps. And if anyone joins the classroom, we'll do a little demo, and you can kind of see how it works. So your Bluetooth has to be on. We'll go to settings, and I set this up like I was doing it for my students. Like they literally need step by step. That's where your settings are. And then you're going to tap on Classroom, but don't forget that you had to go through the settings. Scaffolding is very important here. And there should be an icon that says Classroom beneath the Bluetooth option. Are we seeing that? And if you can join the classroom, the code is 5225. I'm getting a couple. All right, so I'll give it a second, see if anybody has got 4. Yes. And so we didn't have a dongle so that you could see this, but you can see people are adding themselves to my course. It's called JNUC 2018. And so before, this was not possible. So if I had still had classes pushed from Jamf or synced from Apple School Manager and Jamf, I would not have the ability to create a class with you here right now. So you can see the power of this from being able to, say, create a class on the fly if you've got a lot of people in your office hours. All right, 12. I'm calling it at 12. So I'm going to add you guys all to my class. You can see that you showed up. I know your actual name. So Tommy is probably a lot more useful than something saying like T Sunshine 12, because I don't want to address my student as like T Sunshine 12, like I see that you're in the settings app and that's really not what I need right now. That's really impersonal and not very helpful. So, perfect. So we've got the app here. You're all in my class. I can see what you're doing. Robin's in the JNUC app. Andrew's in the messaging app. Everyone else is still in settings. So, Eric, I'm going to use you as an example. So I'm pulling up Eric's screen right now. It's loading. The Wi-Fi is working really hard. It's chugging right along. So when it finally loads, I'm going to be able to see what Eric's looking at in the JNUC app. Can also lock his iPad. So I'm locking it right now. It's requesting permission because we're all adults. It's also probably, again, working with the Wi-Fi. Let me go ahead and cancel that so we can keep doing examples. You have the ability to also mute their iPad. I think locking their iPads is my most favorite thing in the higher education classroom. And while it may seem a little intrusive, it's not. They pay to be there, they've chosen to be there, and they should want to stay on task and kind of get something out of the course. So it's It's also much less disruptive than saying, hey, Lisa, you're in the Apps app, and that's not what I want. Instead, I can just lock Lisa's iPad, carry on with the conversation and delivering the content that we're going over, and not miss a beat in the classroom. Also, doing things like locking the entire course, making groups. This has been really awesome. So adding people to groups is just as easy as clicking the plus group button and then naming the group. From there, you can add in anyone you want. And in a class of 50, making sure that everyone participates in a large group activity can be really challenging. So as soon as they participate, I just put them in the group. And I airplay this so that everyone can see it, so that you know if your name doesn't have a check mark, I still need participation from you. And then you can save the group and know that that's everyone that participated that day. That's just one way to use the groups tool. There's obviously a lot more things that you could do with that. You can also open apps. So we're going to have everybody open the JNUC app. So, and then what's really neat is that on 4 of the iPads, it couldn't open the JNUC app. So did Andrew, Robin, Tommy, did you guys all get pushed to the JNUC app? Yeah. And it'll tell you, it'll say, hey, 4 of your iPads don't have this app, which is kind of empowering in the higher education realm, because you can then say, hey, download that app, guys, we're using it for class. Or if it's an app that has been curated for your course, you can email me in our institution and say, hey, I've got these 4 students that don't have this app, could you push it to them? So being able to use Apple Classroom in higher education has been very empowering. We have learned so much. We have also, a lot of our instructors that were using different proctoring tools now just use Apple Classroom, and they'll lock the students into the Canvas app, and then they can use the screens option, so you can flip it. You can see everyone's screens at the same time to proctor, and then they don't have to actually leave the podium, or they don't have to leave the place that they're teaching in. And it completely cuts out having a third-party app. So that is the quick and dirty on how we implemented Apple Classroom and how Apple and Jamf just keep getting better and better and making things even more available for us to continue with transformational information, transformational innovation, and also our active learning ecosystem. So here we go. This is just where we started. You can see there's a line at that deployment. They just stood there in a line. And now we actually have places for students. They all come in, they sit down, they get one-on-one attention. It's about 3 steps to set up your iPad, even less with some of the features that are coming out with 8 and 9. So I'm very excited about that. And that is our Apple Classroom. Thanks, guys. There's already a question right there.
With your transition to the ad hoc classroom, did that mean you no longer have to fight the CSV upload, like you just discontinued that?
Yes, so we still do get those manifests because we worked really hard to be able to grab all that information. But no, we are just running the ad hoc classroom. If instructors request that we do their classes, we have them available to us to do that upload, and then I would manually go in and push their class. But a lot of instructors have been really excited to make their own ad hoc class, because then, like I said, it allows them to do things that they haven't been able to do, like making classes in office hours and things like that.
Okay. And one other question, the ad hoc classroom is kind of an opt-in thing, so like students opt in and you can control them until they say they want to opt out. Have you had any pushback or kind of issues with that?
We haven't, and maybe like I'm just we're lucky at Maryville. Our students have been really willing to participate. The first time that I tested out the ad hoc classroom, I was super nervous about that too. But it was with the class of 52, which I think gives you a pretty good spread. Most of the classes at Maryville, just to give you an idea, are anywhere from 18 to 30 students in the classroom. So this was a larger class, and I haven't had anyone opt out yet. And they're first years, so they have like a lot of opinions. Yeah.
What are some popular majors that use Apple School Manager at your university?
Yeah, so I would say our heaviest usage, wouldn't say that it's like specifically majors. I would say more so schools and colleges. So one of our physics instructors she's just off the chain with innovations, like for lack of a better way to explain it. And she has integrated Apple School Manager and Classroom into all of her courses, and so now it's just spread through the arts and sciences. Several of our design and visual arts instructors use it. I have actually just spoken with some math folks that are looking to integrate it in some of their math classes. They've been learning how to do equations and things with Explain Everything, and they're trying to seize the opportunity to have students airplay. And kind of the quickness of them being able to control, now it's your turn to airplay, now it's your turn to airplay, is starting to spread through the business school as well. Got back into the right and then all the way in the back.
As far as the iPad deployment, did you start with a specific pilot group? And if so, how big was that pilot group?
The pilot group was pretty big because it was all of the incoming freshmen that we got in fall 2014. And we were probably rivaling about a 600-person incoming that year. So I would say the smallest deployment we had that year would have been about 70 students, and the largest would have been about 170.
But you deployed all of those all at once?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then did faculty have them in advance?
Yes, so we did do faculty, and we had less faculty at the beginning because Digital World started out as an initiative where certain courses were adopted into the program, and those classes were the classes that used the iPad, but still all freshmen got them. Now our university is a Digital World university, so there's no specific course that says, oh, well, if you take Chem 102, you use the iPad, but if you take 103, you don't. So yes, we had a subset of instructors that had already agreed to be the Digital World pilot group for instruction. They had gone through the prototype of that semester-long development that we do, and then we sent the students in.
Do you use, sorry, that's very loud. Do you use the managed Apple IDs that Apple School Manager has, and you don't use them?
No.
Because we get 250 gigs of iCloud space as long as we use those.
Mm-hmm. No, so all of our students have their own Apple IDs. It's a little harder. So we tossed around the idea of managed Apple ID and shared iPad kind of on a smaller scale at Maryville. We loan iPads from the library. So for students that do not start out as full-time students, they loan an iPad until they become full-time. And so we tried doing managed Apple IDs and shared iPad for just those, and these students are adults. They want too much variety, and the idea was that we were giving them a customizable environment to use this tool in, so we felt like it would have been limiting.
My turn. So, sorry to be a heretic here, but do you have any frame of reference for Google Classroom comparative?
We have not used
Or
Google
anyone.
Classroom. We have not used Google Classroom, no.
Anyone in the room speak to that?
I think Google Classroom is more like, I'm sorry. I think Google Classroom is more like Schoology or. It's like a CMS. Yeah.
Okay.
Where Apple Classroom is more about controlling the iPads.
Synchronizing the classroom. Controlling the iPad is accurate, but when you say that to a bunch of college-age students, they're like, you're going to control my iPad? No, we're going to synchronize the classroom. They freak out about semantics.
You mentioned earlier that you were pulling data from Canvas in order to get those CSVs.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult was that? We use Canvas quite exclusively at our institution, and we don't really have like what you would call technical people that are overseeing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of nervous that if I come back and say, yeah, I need this info now, get it for me, I need it in this form, that they're going to freak out and go, we don't even know how to get it working. So how did that go, and how technical was that of an export?
So pretty technical, but not super hard for us because the administrator of Canvas at our institution is highly technical. So he already has scripts running that give him different output. So what he did was he took all of that information, and we had made that map for him, and he matched up all the information that he had, and then he just made a new export. And so that's why now we can just go into our online learning space and request that manifest, and it's always ready to run. But I can share my information with you after this if you want, and we can get more into the nitty gritty of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Down here in the front.
I'm the Eric you tried to take over. So my director's talked with your director, and we're going to one-to-one this coming August.
Awesome. What school are you from?
Hastings College.
Oh, awesome. Hey.
Hey, are there any words of experience, don't do this, rabbit holes that you would recommend us avoiding?
Whoa.
I mean, like anything that you were like, oh, yeah, this is a great idea, and then all of a sudden it created more headaches?
There's so many things that we did that we were like, oh, don't make, I would say don't make campus-wide decisions and apply them immediately. That's what I would say. I'm probably the most technical person that works on my team. And so I make sure to work with a lot of other people on other teams that are much more technical than I am, so that we do a lot of testing. Testing is your best friend. You can think that something is the greatest idea you've ever had, roll it out to 20 iPads, and then realize that there are 30 things you didn't think of. Always have a test group. I have part of my test group here with me. And we were testing last night, we were testing this morning. So yeah, just making sure you have a core group of people with iPads that you trust to give you feedback, and that will say, oh yeah, that's awesome, roll it out, and mean it explicitly. All right. That's all.